Hey, thank you for tuning in to What Did Jesus Say? Today we want to look at two or three statements of Jesus. We know that everything that Jesus said is important and good for us to know so that we can build our Christian life, so that we can best follow Him, and so that we might be able to have a closer walk with the Lord and improve ourselves spiritually. You know, everything that Jesus said can help us improve our lives. It can motivate anyone to become a true spiritual person. You know, down through the course of human history, there's been a lot of religious teachers, so-called masters, and their philosophies and their teachings have transcended through time, from the ancients down even to today, to our modern and progressive society. But there can really only be one true master of the universe. And Jesus is the greatest teacher of all time, and there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, the Bible talks about turning civilizations upside down because of the truth. People believing it and setting themselves free from sin and from negativity, and becoming the type of people that God would be pleased with, and the family of God was born. So only one really can be the greatest teacher, and that was Jesus. It is Jesus still today. Only one can be the way, the truth, and the life. Only one can be the true, only begotten Son of God. And there's a lot of things that Jesus said, and a lot of these things have come from a lot of things that Jesus, the principles that he talked about. He talked about them in his sermons. The Sermon on the Mount is just rich and full of the principles that we're talking about. And there are three statements we hopefully will have time today to look at. Three things that he said in the passage of Scripture that I'm already turned to is Matthew chapter 5, 25 through 30. And in this group of scriptures, we're going to notice at least three things that Jesus said and why he said them. Today I'm in the New American Standard Version of the Bible. I'm usually in the King James, but I'm switching it up on us today. But so glad that you've tuned in to us. And if you got to see Brother Nick Taylor's class last week on his devotional, he did an excellent job. I hope that if you haven't seen that yet, if you'll go back and look at last week. Today we're going to be on page 30 and 31, and it's going to spill over to page 32. But here we go with our reading. Make friends quickly with your opponent at law while you are with him on the way, so that your opponent may not hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Truly, I say unto you, you will not come out of there until you have paid up the last cent. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say unto you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And if your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. For it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. If your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you. For it's better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be put into hell. So we see two or three things going on here with Jesus' teaching. At first, he makes a statement about agreeing with thine adversary quickly. And there's a reason for this. You know, we might at first think, why do we need to why are we told to do this? Agree with thine adversary. I think there are a number of reasons, but let's talk about a couple. One is here we find that if we don't do so in some cases, and we need to have some wisdom here, we need to have some prudence, and we need to kind of know what's going on. We need to be a little bit clever sometimes about what's happening to us, and not naive. So, I can think of some situations with some legal things that it's much better sometimes to just you're not agreeing that you've done anything wrong, but you're agreeing to the circumstances and to the results and some of the things that's going on with the with the case, um, and one of the reasons that you're doing that is because if you don't do it, it doesn't pay to keep going with it. It can get worse and worse and worse, and this is what Jesus is talking about here, because our enemy, he wants to see us fall. And so I think what we're talking about here, and I know what Jesus is teaching here, is pick your battles, and know who you're fighting, and sometimes putting off some problems may be the best thing to do. Just putting them off and not trying to fight against certain things that have to do with in the area of judgment. We're not talking about not standing up for what's right. No, we're not talking about that and taking a defense for the gospel and for God, and then having to be punished for that. We're talking about some judgment issues, some things that some areas of decisions and choices that could benefit me if I just agree with them and then let's just get through them and pick my battles. So I think this is what's really going on here. It's just to help protect Christians who were constantly during the first century being persecuted, having witnesses come up against them falsely, trying to get them in prison any way that people could, and there was a lot of persecution. So this was going to help them to, if it was a little judgment matter, a little civil matter, was going to be able to help them through some of it a lot better. I know there's a lot more going on here too, some deeper things, but we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about this next thing that Jesus is talking to us about looking at a woman, and this is he's addressing men here, and he says, "I say unto you, whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her, hath committed adultery with her already in his heart." It's very important that Christians have the right motives, the right attitudes, and to know what we should be thinking about in our hearts and what we shouldn't be thinking about. So there's nothing wrong with looking at people. I think it's rude to stare at people, but we can recognize a beautiful person, whether it's a man or a woman or anybody, because God really has, that's a blessing from God. Even the Bible talks about beautiful people, and it's okay to make those kinds of judgments as God's people. But what's not okay is crossing that line where we have lust, we have a lustful eye, or we have lust in our hearts towards a person. And so this is crossing the line. How is it crossing the line? One example would be if a man looked at a woman and he desired to have her as his wife instead of his own wife, and he coveted her in that way. And so that would be wrong. If he wanted to have a relationship with her that was improper, impure, and he continued to dwell on that in his heart and enjoyed thinking about it much to his detriment. These are kinds of things where he crosses the line, and I know that people are visual beings, as we see on page 31. I have here, people are visual beings, especially men who may look at women with impure motives. We live in an immodest society, so true. So keeping oneself pure can at times be extremely difficult, but it is absolutely necessary in order to please the Lord, finish the race in earnest, and win an everlasting crown. So we could go all the way back to, if we want to look at this and use the entire Bible, we can go back to Genesis and look and see where the devil had tempted Eve with the beauty of that fruit that was forbidden for her to eat and for Adam to eat. But she looked at it and saw that it was good for food. It was pleasant to her eyes. And it would make someone wise, like the devil said. And so she had the lust of the eye there, and the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. And really all sins fall into one of those categories. So I have also here an example where Job recognized that this was a temptation for him, and he actually had made an agreement with his eyes, a covenant inside of his heart, saying that he wouldn't look at a female person with the intent of coveting after or lusting after this person. So it's real important that we are careful in this area. And then down in the meditation we have, does the act of committing adultery in one's heart constitute physical fornication? This is really, it's not, this sounds difficult to answer, but it's really not. We have to know what fornication is and what adultery is. But if we just look at the statement that Jesus made, we see a little part on the end of that that's has a big meaning. When he says, but I say unto you, whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already. Notice the next part. We don't need to lose sight of it. In his heart. There's a difference in thinking something in your heart and actually following through with it. And so there's the difference. And it would be like if we take the subject of lying, for example. How many times has a person thought that they might tell something that's not true and then back that up and didn't say it? They just thought it and thought maybe that would get them out of trouble, but then they didn't follow through. So that they really didn't lie, did they? But they do need to work on their what's in their hearts, because that's where it begins. And out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So there's a difference there. A prayer that we might pray along these thoughts is, Lord, help us to set our attention to eternal things. Teach us to focus on those things that can save us. Dear Lord, teach us to speak with wisdom. Help us to know how we are to express ourselves towards Thee and towards others. And so those are two statements that Jesus made in Matthew 5 in the Sermon on the Mount, from Matthew 5:25 through 28. Agree with thine adversary quickly. That's a key word there in that statement, quickly. And then looking at a woman, and the key part of that to understanding what that means is in his heart. He's doing this in his heart, not with his body, but in his heart. Then the third thing that we want to look at today, the third statement is, if thy right eye offend thee, or thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. And this scripture is in Matthew 5:29 through 30. We really don't need a lot of explanation for this idea. One of the ways that we are tempted, as we've already mentioned, is through our eyes. The lust of the eyes has been around ever since the beginning of time, as we pointed out. Jesus said that our eye was, if it was causing us to stumble, or we were doing something with our hands that was causing us to stumble, that it would be best to take that part away from us. It would be better to do that than to be entirely lost. Now, is the Lord telling us to harm our bodies? No. But he's saying this, he's letting us know how serious it is to sin against the Lord. How serious it is to be in danger of the judgment and danger of hellfire, to be in danger at the judgment of being lost eternally. It's really serious business. And so he's using these examples, very dramatic, caustic examples of taking your eye out or taking your hand off. Though the Lord is compassionate towards us, He's also letting us know that we learn over in 1 Corinthians 10:13 that we, his children, are provided a way to escape each temptation. We really need to be looking for that way of escape when we're tempted. There's always a danger in giving in to temptation because we are in the flesh, but remember that we have strength through Jesus. So what do we need? Well, we're in desperate need of developing some self-control. We can't do it by ourselves, but we do need to do what we can do. To have strength, we need to be able to trust in the Lord with all of our hearts, not some of our hearts. And these are some steps towards and some keys to fighting temptations. Being strong in the Lord will help us take the good fight to the next level. Now, just think about it just for a moment. And if Jesus was tempted, we're certainly going to be tempted also. You remember in each one of his temptations, and we had this in an earlier class, that Jesus used the scripture in fighting those temptations. Do you remember that? I'm sure you do. And you remember when he said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. That's one of the scriptures that he used when Satan came to him and asked him to turn stones into bread. But just think about this just for a minute. The Apostle Paul, he wrote more of the New Testament than any of the other writers. There's 8 writers of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Peter, Paul, James, and Jude. Paul wrote most of the New Testament. So here's a man that struggled against sin, and he tells us over and over again that he struggles against sin. Doesn't it make sense that all Christians will do battle in their lives with temptation? It certainly does. But we are not left without protection. The Lord tells us that he protects us, he helps us, he gives us a way of escape, and he also gives us armor that we put on. He provides that armor, and we learn about that armor in Ephesians chapter 6. So sometime or another when you have an opportunity, just glance at that and look at the list of the pieces of armor that we can put on to help us in our good fight of faith. Lord, help us to prepare ourselves for the fight. Assist us as we resist our common enemy. The Christian is always in a fight for what's right. We are always put to the test because we're in the testing ground here on this earth. As we've mentioned in some of our other classes, we're just passing through. Jesus was just passing through, so we're just passing through. Why? Because we follow him, and we're going where he goes. And we're going to think like him, and we're going to behave like him. We're going to try to be more like him every single day. The only way we can do it is look at some of these, look at all of these statements that Jesus makes and learn from them and try to apply them to our lives. I'm so glad that you've spent time with us today, and as we shared these things from the New Testament. The Sermon on the Mount is just full of these good teachings and good ideas that would help any of us to improve ourselves. And we really need to do that. We need to not be content with just having a little bit of knowledge and glancing at the scriptures once or twice a year, and going to church whenever we feel like it. It's much more than that. It's the way of life. It's the best way of life, and we all need to help each other get to heaven, and that's what it's all about. So I'm glad that you're with us today, and as always, keep the faith. God bless you, and God bless your family. Until next time, we'll talk to you later. Pray for each other.